I'm Mark Halperin, and this is an all-new edition of Morning Meeting. Welcome, everybody. Sean, Dan, and I about to take you through a rollicking romp through the day's events. We'll kick them around a bit, and then we will, as always, take your questions. Please, if you'd like to ask a question and you're here on the two-way platform, raise your hand. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome in. Thank you for watching. Don't raise your hand. I won't see you, but also don't put garbage in the chat. We're about peace, love, and understanding. Even in the most tumultuous of times, even as we're discussing the fate of human beings and their families, we still extend the presumption of grace to all, and we hope you have a civil conversation, even in the chat. That's what this platform is about. It differentiates us at least a wee bit from some of the other media that's out there. And again, we're very grateful to you for making time to spend some time with us. Dan, Sean, welcome to both of you. How are things going?
Fantastic, Mark. It's great to see you and Dan this morning.
All right, good. Dan,
Good morning, everyone.
read your part in the prompter. This is all scripted, by the way, this entire show. Again, if you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. It appears there's snow in Rhode Island, which we may get to later in the broadcast. All right, today, President Biden gets his intelligence briefing, and then at 6 p.m., he appears with the vice president and the second gentleman, and he lights the national Christmas tree on the White House ellipse. The vice president does that. And besides that, as always, say it with me. So we'll receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with the staff. The meetings will be closed press. J.D. Vance, no known public events. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy on Capitol Hill for at least a pair of Doge briefings. And then something I left out of the day book because I didn't know about it because I'm an idiot. Donald Trump is on Long Island tonight attending a big Fox News event, the Fox Nation's 6th annual Patriot Awards, hosted by Sean Hannity and featuring a cavalcade of Fox News stars so long, a list so long, I would take the hour if I read it all. But it includes Bill Hemmer and Steve Doocy and Brian Kilmeade and Martha McCollum and Dana Perino and Judge Jeanine Pirro, Jesse Waters.
Basically, everybody that's angling for an interview with Trump.
Yeah. So let's start there. The timing is interesting because there are a lot of people who Donald Trump will be rubbing elbows with tonight who are very big supporters of Pete Hegseth. Donald Trump is listening to lots of different voices about this. I'll give you my reporting and then throw it to you, Sean. I heard from a very good source today that by the weekend, Ron DeSantis will be the nominee for defense secretary. One source, I'm not telling you it's definitely true, but that's certainly the case. However, if you go on X, you will see another cavalcade of strong supporters for Hegseth who are making this a test of Donald Trump's fidelity to MAGA, and they find it insulting that someone who MAGA has turned on bigly, Ron DeSantis, would possibly replace someone who casts himself at least as full-on MAGA. So, Sean, where do you believe the nomination of Pete Hegseth stands at the moment?
So I stand by what I said yesterday. I mean, I still think what was unhelpful yesterday, no surprise to the audience here, was the reaction of Joni Ernst. He had a good day tactically. The mom, the interviews he went on, Megyn Kelly, Wicker, Roger Wicker from Mississippi, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, had some favorable things to say about him. He met with Kramer, another member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. But the media was obviously fixated on Joni Ernst because of her background, and so her lack of endorsement and support for Pete, I don't think helped. The question is, what is she saying privately to Trump? I know Trump, or at least Team Trump, and from what I gather, the president himself is trying to get a better read on her. Is she a no and just doesn't want to say it publicly? Is she willing to get there? So they're trying to sense whether or not there's a possible ability to get to 50 votes. And that's where things stand right now. I think that it's a straight up math issue. If he has another couple people that say, hell no, you saw he's going to meet with Collins and Murkowski next week. That's a positive sense. It sort of gives you something to look forward to. So the question is, and I mean, Fox and Friends this morning was going all out trying to make the case for Pete. What a great guy he was. The idea there, clearly the programming was for one member of the audience. I still think that he's maybe on thin ice, but he's got some, I will tell you then part two, I I think that DeSantis would sail through the Senate process. He's a Navy JAG officer, so on that front, I'm very. It's nice to see some more Navy folks. But I will tell you that I do think there's going to be a massive MAGA blowback, and you saw this with the DEA pick. Now, the difference again is that Ron DeSantis's policies. I think he's been a phenomenal governor, but I think that for a lot of MAGA folks, they look at what his challenge to President Trump, who had been so helpful in DeSantis's political ascent, as a betrayal that cannot be forgiven. So I think that that's the sort of the big issue here. He might be able to get through the Senate, and that's what Trump is for. But will MAGA blow back on him the way they did with Chad, the DEA guy? I get the thinking on this, but I'd be very careful. And I think that you're going to get a lot of folks who would argue, and this is just me presenting it just so that people don't go nuts on me here, is to say DeSantis, his anti-woke policies are exactly what we've been looking for. He's got the managerial experience as a governor. He's a naval officer. He's an attorney by trade. He's a JAG officer. So, I mean, like, he's combat deployed. Like, he checks every box. I think that this, for a lot of folks, is just on the MAGA world, is going to be a bridge too far to say this guy betrayed you, betrayed us. And so, we'll see. I think Donald Trump feels like he's got a lot of leeway, but I still think that today is going to be crucial for Pete, right? It's a Thursday. He's got a lot more meetings. He needs some public show of support from senators.
Right, Dan, let me just slip in real quick because I have a bad memory and I want to annotate a few things Sean said. Every day he's alive, he's alive. He's a step closer to getting a hearing, and he thinks he gets a hearing, he can pull a Kavanaugh and do really well. And as Sean said, those meetings next week are really key because now Murkowski and Collins probably can't publicly come out against him. Probably. From DeSantis's point of view, if he ever wants to be the Republican nominee, he needs to get on the right side of MAGA. And putting Laura Trump in the Senate, being part of the Trump administration, saying the right things about woke in the military, I won't say it's his only hope. But again, if he doesn't get this job, it's very hard for me to see how he rehabs himself with MAGA, at least parts of MAGA. Put up the graphic.
Well, Mark, I will say this, just if you want to talk about that thinking, right? So you're DeSantis. You've obviously established your bona fides as governor. I don't think that there's much more political runway in that job.
Correct.
You go take over DOD, you restructure it, you get rid of the wokeness, the DEI training, you become a hero all over again. You talk about readiness and preparedness. You build up your credentials on the national security front,
and you appear with Trump in nonstop photo ops about national security.
That's why I say, where is JD Vance and where's Don Jr. on this? I said it yesterday.
Put up the graphic, please, and then Dan, throw it over to you. So the Wall Street Journal did the thing. I had this pet peeve when people talk about whether bills are going to pass or people are going to get confirmed. The only thing that matters is a whip count. And news organizations should spend a lot more time doing that if they want to inform their readers. The Wall Street Journal, again, put up the graphic, please, of the Journal. There you go. So the Journal says the senators to watch are Ernst, McConnell, Young, Murkowski, Collins, and the new senator like John Curtis. Young has been an under-discussed senator. He did not endorse Donald Trump. He does not give an F about what Donald Trump thinks. He's not afraid of being primaried. He's not worried about whatever. And I think it's important to say, despite what MAGA is saying about some of these senators, that they're advise and consent in the most idealistic way. They're trying to help the country and help Donald Trump not end up with bad cabinet officials. There's nothing in it for them. To the contrary, it is a negative for their careers. They'll take a ton of heat. Their families will take heat if they oppose the Trump nominee. They're not doing it out of spite. They're not doing it out of malice. They're not trying to trade anything. And I don't believe this is a complete list of senators who have doubts about Pete Hegseth's fitness for the job. But these are the people that Mar-a-Lago is watching. None of them have come out publicly against it, but all of them have some combination of the half dozen concerns that people have raised about Pete Hegseth. Dan.
Yeah, actually, it's a good tee up, Mark. Thank you, because obviously Democrats are not as important here, given they're in the minority, and you only need 50 votes. But I think it's important to step back and remember, as we're talking about the politics and the kind of strategy and the tactical nature of is he going to get over the line, that we're talking about a job that requires, strategic judgment, sobriety of thought, discipline. And, we're talking, there's the pushback here is more on the allegations of sexual misconduct. What isn't really being debated is that as a manager, his record of fiscal decisions leaves a lot to be desired. That on the issue of his sobriety, it doesn't seem to be a question that he has struggled with it. It's my understanding that he has made promises in private in these meetings with senators that he won't drink while serving.
Publicly, actually. Publicly.
Yeah, that people can decide whether that would, he'll honor that, given his personal struggles, and we're all sympathetic with people who struggle with alcoholism. But if Kamala Harris had nominated an MSNBC host with this history of management, poor management, alcohol abuse, and then again, the sexual assault allegations may or may not be true, Republicans would be jumping up and down that this person would be the head of the Department of Defense with multiple live wars going on. So I think, Mark, to your point, there are Republican senators who have concerns that they think he might not be in the best interest of this country. And, it does deserve a hearing. And if he gets to a hearing answering questions about all of this, no one has disputed that stuff. It's been the allegations of misconduct with women, which is not something to minimize.
I want to make one quick point that I got asked about in the comment section a couple of times. When we talked about the Gates nomination, the allegations against Gates, and I guess the pushback against Gates, right? And this is the strategical piece of this. Matt Gaetz was facing personal issues and was having to fight back on personal fronts. Where the Hegseth team, and I pointed this out differently yesterday, was that what they tried to do is take the personal attacks against Pete and twist them into an attack on MAGA policies. You're attacking me. So someone was asking me what's different about the MAGA attack. It's Matt Gaetz is definitely more MAGA than Pete Hegseth, right? But the bottom line is that Pete and his team have twisted the personal attack into an attack on MAGA and its policies and its America First agenda, which is something that the Gaetz team did not do, maybe didn't have time to do. And frankly, sometimes you have the foresight of watching somebody else go first and go, okay, here's how we handle this differently. But it's a very different twist on this because they realized if we make this about us and the attacks on us, we might lose. But if we can get the base rallied around it, that I am being attacked because of my policies, I think it's much more effective.
You're absolutely right. There are obviously other differences, including not everyone likes Matt Gaetz all that much, and he criticized senators, including by name. And Pete Hegseth on the Hill is either a not known or well liked. And the other difference is, like, Pete Hegseth really wants this, and I think I know there's some people in his world thinking about, is there a consolation prize? Is there some White House job or something else he could get that wouldn't require confirmation? Matt Gaetz he's like, every day is a new adventure. He didn't really care if he got the job, I don't believe, and he was happy to walk away from it. Hegseth seems now to basically have said, I've broken with Fox, although I don't know, he could go back to Fox, I suppose.
But wait, hold on. I think what you're saying, Mark, is so important for people to understand because Matt Gaetz has a future. He can go do rallies and events. People want to hear from Matt Gaetz as a hero. And Pete Hegseth has 7 children. They, at least from the reporting on Fox, when they refer to him, they say our former colleague. It would appear as though they cut ties with him. So if he ends up walking away from this, and how do you go back to your employer saying, hey, by the way, I know that I had all of these charges against me. Can you take me back? Right? Fox would have a hard time. I would hope they wouldn't. But my point is that when you're trapped like this and you have to go all in, that's a very different mentality.
Well, 100%. I think it's, Sean, though, but to that point, the allegations are not sufficient to warrant employment at Fox, but they are sufficient to warrant employment running the Department of Defense.
No. I
know that's not what you're saying. I know that's not what you're saying. But
there's another difference.
That is remarkable.
Matt Gaetz's brand is bad boy. Okay, he said something like, "I'm a representative, not a role model," or something like that. I forget the exact quote. Pete Hegseth's brand is, I found Jesus and I'm happily married and all these things are in the past. he's going to have a much different brand. And I will tell you, I believe he's playing a little bit with fire, saying he welcomes the FBI background check. Not sure that's going to end happily for him. We'll see. All right. Anything else on Hegseth?
The one last thing, I'm sorry, because I just want one quick thing. I got asked this several times yesterday after the show about from reporters, whatever, on vetting, because so many times people will say, how does this not happen in a vetting? A vetting is social media posts, your employment, your tax returns, things like that. Allegations don't come up in vetting. No one calls your sister and says, hey, let me ask you, how did you behave? How did you now, for an FBI, no,
that's not entirely true.
No,
the FBI does
drinking. They will look at
contacted by the
no,
FBI regarding people being appointed.
Right.
Drinking.
What I'm saying is, right. So when you do an SF-86 background check, yes, you will have them go out 3 deep and then 6 deep. But what I'm saying is, generally speaking, when a campaign vets somebody, it's at a level that's public information, what's available, and you're relying on the individual to be honest with you. And so if you, and this is why I bring this up, because we talked about this a while ago. People always think, oh, no one's going to remember the 2008 Christmas party where I, dressed up as Santa and was bad. It's going to come out. And so, but I get also, how does this not come up in the vet? And the vet doesn't show that you were, some kind of inappropriate comments or behavior.
Well,
So
but this,
go ahead.
but this is where the fact that the Trump campaign has made the decision to use private vetting and internal vetting versus FBI vetting and then kind of making the nomination public. I mean, because when you are formally through the system, the FBI does call friends. They do ask you about your experience, their judgment. Did you see them drinking? Did you see them having affairs? Things that they could be blackmailed about. Like, I have had multiple friends go into government where I have gotten those calls. And then to your point, Sean, there is the attestation of, did you do anything that you're supposed to? And that is hard to go back 20 years. But this is a question about the fact that Donald Trump, again, has kind of thrown out the norms of a transition that have been put in place for the best interests of the country. I suspect because he doesn't trust the FBI and others, and that's a separate conversation, but it is a risk politically and potentially more than that to kind of go your own way here.
And the senators don't like it. It's not the norm to do interviews as he did yesterday during this phase of the process, because you're supposed to be deferential to advise and consent and the senators. He felt he had to do a public interview. His lawyer has been out talking to the press a lot, and his lawyer told Politico yesterday that it wasn't necessary to disclose the confidential the agreement he made with the woman accused him of sexual assault because no charges came of it. That's not the kind of thing you'd expect to disclose to the transition.
No, Donald Trump's been on the scene. Donald Trump's been on the scene for almost 10 years. There should never be a sentence that says Donald Trump and norms.
But my point is part of why some people in Mar-a-Lago, and maybe even the president-elect, are not totally ready to stand by him is he's not been fully forthcoming with them about things.
Well, that's right. And that's the difference. I mean, I went through this in 2016 when we would get the candidates on the phone and I would say, let me just run through a series of questions with you because this is what's going to happen. And they would, and some of them were more forthcoming. And it's kind of funny what some people think. Because I mean, I had a couple very interesting conversations with people when they were disclosing things to me that I was like, okay, that's okay. You're good on that. But some people just aren't forthright. And again, that's a key point that you're making, is that if they feel betrayed when they were asked, which is, we asked you this point blank and you didn't say anything, and this isn't like you forgot to take the trash out on Wednesday.
But again, I'll just say it again. Remarkable. The guy's lawyer tells Politico, I didn't think that was something we needed to disclose to the transition. That's nuts. Dan, why is Donald Trump going on Meet the Press?
I actually suspect that he may be potentially trying to kind of reestablish the enemy, for lack of a better word, heading, right now, this is about Republican on Republican. Are they going to confirm it? Like, there's very little talk about Democrats because they're largely irrelevant for him right now. And I think he's going on to mix it up. I think he's going to go on. He's going to go at her. He's going to turn around and say the media is against us and kind of try to get his side fired up heading into January.
Sean?
He lost a bet to Elon. I mean, I don't, to me, this to me actually matters. Like, he used long form and independent media so effectively these guys, week after week after week, if there's one Sunday show that sucks more than others, it's Meet the Press. And the idea that he's rewarding them to me is ridiculous. That's the one. I mean, if there's one criticism I have so far, that was it yesterday when they announced that. I get Dan's point mixing it up, but it's not a question. And I've had this discussion with the president before. It's not a question of can he handle it? Can he do it? It's a question of prioritizing and rewarding people bad behavior. I mean, these guys they have continued despite everything they got wrong in the election to have roundtables every week that are devoid of anybody that speaks for the Trump side. They bash him, they criticize him, they fail to understand the basics of the election results. And yet the reward is, hey, we're going to give you the first interview. It's so disappointing.
Yeah. So I agree with both of you. And I sent around a story from the Hill about how they're still thinking about taking the seats away from the establishment legacy media in the briefing room. I'm not saying he should do this interview, but I'll tell you why I think he is doing it. First of all, he's still a slave to legacy media. If they called him and said, Vanity Fair, a liberal publication that trashes you every day online, wants to put you on the cover, he would be excited. He loves Meet the Press, granddaddy of them all, longest running show in television history.
But he turned down 60 Minutes.
Yeah, he did because,
which I was so proud of.
Yeah, that was during the campaign. I will say this, and I'm going to choose my words carefully, and it is just a reality. I think for him to have an opportunity to take questions from a Black woman who's not the hardest hitting interviewer on television, I think is a good thing for him. Unfortunately, I believe just the semiotics of that appeal to him. He knows nothing bad can happen with a certain segment of the viewership.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, but I also think that on the flip side, you've got a host that is auditioning for the far left. After Chuck, the idea was, how do you appeal to be the most progressive host possible?
Yeah.
So you're not going to get an interview where it's going to be contentious by nature. And I get to some people that's appealing.
Good for him. That's good.
I get it.
I don't know.
That's where
I
he's
don't know if it will be
attacking a Black woman in an interview where things are going generally well for him.
I would be.
That's what got him elected president.
NBC is spinning off MSNBC. Like, I would not be surprised if they actually attempt to make this welcoming. I don't think it's going to be the Morning Joe crowd of
all right, Dan, let's. I mean, I actually will take the bet. Do you want? I mean, well,
it depends what his game plan is, though, Sean. Because if his game plan is to go in to pick a fight, then I'll bet.
No. See, I disagree with Mark here. I actually think that he wants. I think he wants to show that there's a new Trump. The readout from Morning Joe was, I want to be more, diplomatic.
I think he'll do that on questions where he can, and on questions that are hostile, he'll push back hard. That's my prediction, and I think.
You can't be wrong on that prediction.
Well, no, I could be. He could turn the other cheek. If she said Pete Hegseth, he could say, I understand the concerns that some people have.
Remember, by the way, he's taping it on Friday.
I know.
So this is going to be very interesting because, to your point, you asked Pete Hegseth questions. That's 48 hours. That's like 2 years in Trump.
I mean, he could totally screw them by immediately after the interview saying Hegseth is out, right?
Hey, Mark, can I just, because I'll forget it if I don't say it tomorrow. You brought up real quick the briefing room. If you want to ask or if we want to get into it, we can. I sort of, out of frustration, have written an entire newsletter column that I'm going to put out tomorrow explaining how the briefing room actually works, because a lot of people are, this person should be given credentials, this person should be giving a seat. And there's I think a lack, generally speaking, for obvious reasons, of how the briefing room works. And so I was like, fine, I'm going to write a long form explanation of who sits where and why, when did that happen, who's got responsibility now, who gets the question. I mean, kind of, because this idea of he should credential so-and-so, we can get credentialed tomorrow if they want us to. This is not some tough thing.
I think we should start a campaign to get the morning meeting a seat in the front row.
How about that? I'm in.
All right, good. All right, two things on the Democrats. Dan.
Yes.
Big changing of the guard on Capitol Hill. A week ago, there were sort of wispy conversations of Jamie Raskin trying to beat Jerry Nadler, his pal and friend and mentor. And now Jerry Nadler's laid down his weapons and said that the ranking position on judiciary is yours. We're seeing other ranking members challenge. What's going on?
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, for those who don't know, the Republican Party, you compete to be the ranking member, the chair of a committee. You have a 6-year term limit. And so there's turnover. Younger members, other members kind of cycle through. The Democratic Party has had a history of seniority, meaning the most senior member who's ever been on the committee the longest assumes the leadership position. Whether you're kind of good on the issues or your ability to prosecute a case or not. And it goes to the history of racism in the 70s in the Democratic Party when African-American or Black members could not get ranking member or chairmanships because in a private vote, people just wouldn't do it. So what ends up happening is you get people who are in charge of a committee who are not good fundraisers. They don't help other members. They're not good on television. They're not like all these things. And the younger members for generations have been chomping at the bit to change this, to make it a competition. Let me kind of go and campaign for it. And finally, some younger, I'll say younger, because people have pointed out that Jamie Raskin is 61, but Jerry Nadler 77. So in the Democratic caucus, he's like a baby right now. And they actually pushed, the leadership did not stop this kind of this move by the younger Turks, and it's working. And I think it's fantastic. I think that, you know, a new generation that will that is more sophisticated, that is active, that wants it, that is going to try to keep it, you know, earn their stripes every day. I think it's great to give energy and vigor to the caucus. And this is one of the better changes I've seen in the last month since the election.
It does say something when the younger person, what is Raskin, 61?
61.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that says, but I think what's amazing to me as I've watched this, and obviously, by the way, AOC is now, who's 35, will challenge for the government reform seat. I thought it was fascinating how quick both, what is it, Raul?
Grijalva, stepped down.
The resources chair, like, and then Nadler, like, basically were afraid of their shadow and like gave up. Like there wasn't even a fight. They knew they didn't have the votes. And I think it was telling to me, to your point about fundraising, the idea that an incumbent chairman doesn't even put up a fight says a lot about where they stand with their members, right? I mean, I've been the comms director of 2 House committees and was on the staff of another. Like chairman usually rule with an iron fist. Like, here's where you sit. This is when you ask the questions. You know, you'll take your meal when I say so. And the idea that this chairman, in 2 cases, rolled over that quick really says something about the status that they have within their caucus.
John, it's unbelievable how lazy a lot of them are. They're more concerned about getting a good table at Capitol Grill because they're the ranking member of the chair than helping colleagues and trying to win the majority and trying to enact legislation. They just are like, you can't touch me because I have seniority.
Yeah.
So like I can do a good job or bad job. Doesn't matter.
That Politico story about how Hakeem Jeffries and the other members of the leadership were just sitting back and letting this all happen.
Right.
Quite something.
But not just that, Mark, but the idea that Pelosi, who ruled with an iron fist, basically is encouraging Raskin and others, shows you the current leader, Jeffries, is like, hey, hands off. And then Pelosi behind the back is like playing the role of Rahm Emanuel today. I mean, it's
all
like...
right, I want to get to everybody's questions soon. So one more topic. We're going to return to this topic, but we'll talk about it briefly today, which is the presidential nominating calendar. Yes, it's 4 years away, but it's extremely important because for all the talk of fundraising and, you know, portfolio and record as governor, DeSantis going in, the way you get elected president is you win the nomination. The way you win the nomination historically is you win early primaries and caucuses. That's what's picked our presidents and our nominees. And in 2024, after a long series of efforts to change the Democratic calendar to not privilege Iowa and New Hampshire, the Democrats finally did change the calendar. They went out of sync with the Republicans, which is not just bad for the press because we prefer to cover 2 contests, not 1. I think it's bad for the country. I prefer to have both parties making their case in the same states. There's problems with Iowa and New Hampshire. They're not diverse, but the people of those 2 states take it so much more seriously than anyone else. So, Sean, where do you think we are in terms of this process for both parties? How will it play out in terms of making the determination of which states go first?
So this is really interesting because Biden was able to enact change because he was an incumbent president and had control of the DNC. Yep. This is going to be, we tried this in the RNC, and it's the state parties fight like hell. This is where the new chairman is going to make a difference, both in terms of how they campaign and subsequently afterwards, because again, it's all about votes. Because now you're running this like a board of directors, and so how much influence does not only Iowa or South Carolina, whatever, but people have to remember this is big money, baby. Yep. The idea of how much money comes into Nevada or Iowa or South Carolina because of people decamping there, media buys, etc., hiring operatives. So this isn't just about moving a calendar. This is an economic boon for a state, and everybody knows it.
Why did you laugh at what I said?
Which part?
I said something you laughed at a few minutes ago. You don't remember? I said something about the states going at the same time. You laughed at that.
Oh, because I was just like, from a convenience standpoint, everybody wants it's like you want them at the same time.
Convenience. I want the laboratory of democracy of the.
I know,
but I disagree with you about it being about economics. Yes, money gets.
No. I'm sorry, I didn't say it was about. Hold on, I didn't say it was about.
Both. It's both.
Right, but I'm just saying this is big. But my point is to make the point that it's larger than just a calendar. Who goes first? There's a lot of things at play in terms of power and influence and money. This is a big deal for all of those reasons. But this will really come down to who the next chairman is and how much will that they have to fight this. So,
do you think, Dan? Before Dan goes, Sean, do you think Trump will keep Iowa and New Hampshire first?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because it would take Micah Whatley fighting it out and moving the calendar. Trump doesn't care. I mean, why would he care going forward what the states are? And the last thing he needs, New Hampshire's got a soft spot in his heart, but then Iowa, obviously, he was fine. So he's not going to create chaos for no reason.
I agree. So if the calendars are going to be in sync, the Democrats are going to have to go back, and I think the party cares too much about diversity to go back. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, in addition to the economic, I mean, the number of ambassadors that have disproportionately come out of Iowa and New Hampshire, because you get the momentum is they will fight like heck to protect that. So for those, part of why we're talking about this is there has been a push for years for Nevada to move up, and Harry Reid got it kind of early after Iowa and New Hampshire, before South Carolina. There is now talk about moving Nevada to the front of the line and then potentially going to South Carolina and Michigan. I think it's great that the party is having these conversations. Obviously, we have huge problems with Latinos. We have now lost Nevada, Arizona. We kind of really moved backwards on the presidential level. And so I think the idea that candidates would camp out in Nevada, a very diverse state, kind of a libertarian state, camp out in Michigan, camp out in South Carolina, versus Iowa, which seems to have drifted further away. New Hampshire, we still won. I know it's purplish, but when Democrats think about the future, after the 2030 census, simply winning the blue wall states back will not be sufficient. Like, we need to, lock in or make super competitive the Georgias, the Carolinas, the Nevadas, the Arizonas, the Floridas of the world again. And I think the best thing we could do to ensure that is move them up in the calendar and get candidates, really focusing on those states and what appeals to them.
So one last thing, the candidates themselves matter, right? So where am I going to do, if I'm, Josh Shapiro or Wes Moore or Gretchen Whitmer, what state do I have the best chance of going? And so if you're Gretchen Whitmer, do you want to go to Nevada, or would you rather have the first battle in Iowa, right? I mean, we're
gonna have dinner invitations soon to the state parties, and traditionally people have continued to go to New Hampshire for the state dinners, even when the chance of the primary holding has dissipated. All right, raise your hand if you want to get in. We're going to bring in someone whose perspective on the Hegseth nomination is quite interesting. Greg Kelly, who's as MAGA as it gets, has been talking about the Hegseth nomination on his program. Greg, are you at the reservoir, or where are you? You need to
unmute. You in Central Park? That sure looks like New York.
Unmute, Greg. Got to unmute, Greg. Greg, got to unmute.
Take off the mittens. It's very.
Got to get you those mittens that got the.
All right, Greg, explain.
What getting for Christmas?
Explain why, a little bit man bites dog, you're not pro Hegseth.
They're not mittens, they're gloves, by the way. Mittens are for kids.
Got it.
All right, listen, I'm as MAGA as they come, and I think that the Hegseth nomination was preposterous. I was shocked. I couldn't get over it. Totally unqualified in every way. I can still support President Trump and love the guy. He's not infallible, especially when it comes to personnel. We all know that. I was for Hegseth publicly because he said he was going to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is a bold, even though he technically can't do that. I liked where he was coming from. CQ Brown. No one's talking about him. The allegations over the weekend for me are a total deal killer. He should be finished. I see him as very deceptive. Yesterday on Megyn Kelly, pretending that this is all a media operation because he's against the Forever Wars. He was for the Forever Wars for a long time. People who are watching Fox at one point know that. His lawyer has actually gotten him into this point. One quick point, then I have a question for you guys. His lawyer confirmed that Pete paid the woman who accused him of sexual assault because he was afraid he was going to get fired by Fox if that came out in the height of the Me Too movement. That's blackmail. That shows me that Pete Hegseth is blackmailable. It is beyond ludicrous that this is happening. I think right now, this is all a show so Pete can save face and maybe get his job back. The thing that perplexes me, and for you guys right now, is MAGA supporting him. Quick observation, MAGA is different things to different people. People in MAGA do disagree. We talk about it as if it's a monolith. It's not. I think establishment MAGA is for him, people with podcasts, people who have been on his show. I do not see Pete as MAGA because, I keep an eye on him. I keep an eye on Fox. Fox has done nothing for January 6ers. Fox has done nothing about January 6th. Ashley Babbitt. Fox has run away from election integrity. Fox fired Tucker, who is raising key questions about January 6th. Yet at this moment, it's perceived that he is somehow a MAGA hero. Those are critical issues to MAGA. Mark, you mentioned the big event tonight. 4 years ago, the cool kids in MAGA were turning their back on Fox. So let's face it, MAGA changes their mind. I think it's an illusion that MAGA is for him because MAGA really hasn't given Hegseth hasn't given MAGA anything to really sink their teeth into. What's so good about him? Anti-woke military? Everybody's against that. Everybody's against that on our side. So Dan, particularly you and Mark, is this MAGA support? Do you see it as real? I think, Dan, yesterday you were kind of perplexed. I feel like real MAGA, real people were all about Matt Gaetz, but they don't tweet all day long. They don't go, you know what I mean? They just are not, it's like the not so silent majority. And the elite MAGA doesn't like Gaetz. The elite MAGA loves Hegseth for elite reasons. And elite MAGA, oh, by the way, is superficial MAGA. I'll stop. And thank you, by the way. I so enjoy this platform.
Great. Thank you for that. So your question is, do we think that MAGA really supports Hegseth? Is that your question?
I guess, is it a little bit deeper than that, if you don't mind? There's more than one MAGA. There's MAGA doesn't include everybody. People in MAGA disagree about things. Yeah. And, people keep saying, well, MAGA wants Hegseth. I'm like, is that true? Yeah. Is that really true? And do they know that he's done nothing for January? I mean, personally, I interviewed January 6ers from prison. They never mentioned the name Ashley Babbitt. They never mentioned these things because they could go the way of Tucker. So how did Hegseth suddenly become this MAGA guy? I think it's an illusion and fake, and it's tattoos and it's surface.
I'll go first. I thank you for the question. I think that you're more right than wrong in the sense that MAGA is not monolithic, in the sense that the people who are creating, Twitter is not real life, X is not real life. If you're just on X, I've been struck by how enthusiastic MAGA on X is for Pete Hegseth, more by my, subjective anecdotal experience than they were for Matt Gaetz. They really seem determined to support him. But MAGA to me is Trump. If Trump says, I'm making a change and I want to bring in Ron DeSantis or somebody else to be Secretary of Defense, I don't think MAGA is going to say, we hate Donald Trump. They're going to say, okay, how's this person? So I think MAGA is a bit of a paper tiger. And the fact that there's all these Republican senators who are willing to say, we may not support this guy, again, shows they're not afraid because MAGA doesn't want an unqualified Secretary of Defense. Dan.
I mean, first, just Greg, great set of points. I mean, you just gave a lot to think about here. I don't know what to think. Mark, you make a good point. Does MAGA lead Trump or does Trump lead MAGA? And to Greg's point, because we have this on our side of the aisle, X is not real life. The influencer world sometimes is, it's entertainment. It's how they monetize their livelihood. And then there's real people with real passion. And Trump has historically, had both. So I don't know. I'm going to take a time out to think about this one. Greg, again, great set of points.
I'll just look, Greg. I think this goes back to what I said earlier, and I think it's a great distinction that you're pointing out. It's not necessarily, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm just making a point, which is that there is a distinction. What Pete's team has done is created the impression that by attacking him, you're attacking the MAGA policies, right? So that's what it's not that he's, because as I said earlier, Matt Gaetz is unequivocally more MAGA. But I think what they learned, what the team learned about the Gaetz fall was, okay, but if we can say that Pete is the vehicle for MAGA policies that Donald Trump wants to implement at DOD, i.e. getting rid of DEI and woke policies, et cetera, an attack on Pete is an attack on MAGA. It's not that Pete is the person. He's just the vehicle. And that's where I think you're right. I mean, like, you're right. He is not like the Matt Gaetz of the world, but where Matt, I think, probably in retrospect could have realized, hey, I just need to say an attack on me is an attack on Donald Trump's ability to root out the deep state from the DOJ.
Yeah. Greg, grateful for you for joining. Tell everybody how much you liked the hoodie I was wearing last night.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Did anybody get a load of that? That was, I mean, did you come from Comic-Con? It was something else, folks. You got to watch last night's episode.
All right, Greg,
thank you. Jedi Master.
Come back off, and people want to know if you're on a bike. You're not. You're just walking.
No, just a pedestrian avoiding high-speed bikes. There are a lot of them out here, and they're deadly.
All right, Greg, as they say on television, stay safe out there. Thank you for your reporting. Come back regularly. All right, that's Greg Kelly, not Judith Gray, by the way. He's just using someone else's phone. All right, Diana, please come in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind after you unmute.
Hi there. How are you? So I love the show. I'm from Tennessee. I am currently an independent. I used to be a Democrat a long time ago. I used to take pride in basically voting on the opposite side for my father. So we used to laugh about going out to vote because I'm like, you vote, and now I'll undo you. I had a quick comment and then a quick question.
Yes, ma'am. Take your time.
So the comment is, and I'm saying this as somebody who basically a long time ago entered Harvard as a 16-year-old sophomore. And whenever we saw all the polls, and the polls were dealing with, were you college educated or not college educated? My experience in 70 years is basically that there are some very smart, brilliant people who did not go to college. And I always hated to see that breakout, as though the smarter, more well-informed people were voting Democrat and the others were voting Republican. So I just wish in the polling somehow they could capture kind of what David Brooks wrote about, I think in the Atlantic, that it's not are you college educated or not, but what opportunities are open for you. That would make me feel a lot better. Okay, so that's my comment.
Diana, that's a great point. I love the way you expressed it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And I did not stay at Harvard because I actually got a better education coming back home to a smaller school. At Harvard, I had one class with 800 people and another with 600 people. And I just cried and called my mommy and my daddy because I was 16. Can I come home, please? So anyway.
You went to Harvard when you were 16?
Yeah, I entered as a sophomore. So that
right.
I was a long time ago. I was much smarter than I am now. I'll just say that. So
that's
anyway.
The same reason I didn't go to Harvard, though. I mean, that was exactly why I said no, Harvard. I'm not going there.
I liked my 700-person classes because it was easier to sleep without being detected.
Well, and I will just only add that I told both of my children not to apply to Ivy League, that they could get a better education from my perspective elsewhere, and they both did well. Yeah. But again, they had a ton of opportunities. So I'm kind of a Democrat wannabe, and I'm sorry because I love Sean and everything, but I think I'm a Bill Maher type of Democrat. I'm a Democrat the way they used to be. And my question really, it's more directed at Dan, but we're going to have all these hearings coming up. And what I'm wondering is, can the Dems actually go ahead and use those hearings to connect to all of the people who basically left them, the the independents and also the people who don't have the opportunities. And I'll give a quick example with Robert Kennedy Jr. I live in Memphis, and Memphis is poor, and Memphis is obese and in terrible health. And if the Dems actually came out and talked about what he could do for that segment, it might be a way of connecting better to people who don't have the opportunities and also to the independents. So thank you.
Yeah, very, very, very well said. And also, as somebody born and raised in New Haven, Connecticut, you can trash Harvard all you want here. But I think the job that Democrats can try to accomplish in hearings is to say that we are for people. We are for you. Ask these nominees, what are you going to do to better people's lives? So to your point, I think you've seen Cory Booker and some other Dems have hugged Robert Kennedy on talking about childhood nutrition and ways to make our food supply line more safe and healthy. I think on the other side is to show, like, here we had this whole conversation about the Secretary of Defense, and it's about, is he MAGA enough, right? Is he going to get rid of DEI enough? Not, is he going to make the Defense Department more efficient and lethal? Is he going to make us a better fighting force and keep us safe? So I think where Democrats can show we are for you and have your interests at heart, I think it is a chance to begin to rebuild the party, to connect with the average voter, to say, as Trump has done successfully, I hear you, I understand you, and I'm fighting for you. We look like we're fighting, to pile on the Ivy League, for the Ivy League professor in a faculty lounge, with pronouns. And James Carville famously said that we do sound like we're talking in a faculty lounge. We don't talk like normal people. So I think, to your point, hopefully Democrats use these hearings to make the case that Trump is out for revenge and MAGA, and not for you, or MAGA priorities that are not necessarily the priorities of the rest of the country that got him elected. That hopefully is how we start the process of rebuilding trust.
Sean.
It might also be a way of actually figuring out who's going to be running in 2028.
Totally.
Basically, you can get somebody that does a good job doing that. And at some point, not associated with this is more for Mark. Whenever anybody's praising Gretchen Whitmer, I want them to go back and look at what she did to basically change the rules so that the guy from, I think he was the police chief in Detroit, could not run against her. She's not anywhere near as good as we think she is. She's the Democrat Trump. That's all I'm going to say. Okay.
Well, I agreed with your first point, which is I think she's pretty overrated. But I think that about a lot of the governors who people talk about. Yeah. I think in terms of their capacity to run a national campaign, I'm more skeptical than a lot of people are. And again, not just about her. I'm sure I had the skepticism about the governor of New Jersey, of Illinois, of some of the others. Sean, do you want to say anything?
No, I think it's a great comment that you're making, and a great. I mean, this is something I appreciated Dan's comment, so I stand with them.
All right, Diana, since you're so thoughtful, tell us why you like two-way so much.
I like two-way. So Mark, you're great, but the reason I like two-way is I love to see the interaction between Dan and Sean.
It's the whole show. I just try to stay out of the way.
They're so good. They're so thoughtful, and so yeah, that's the real reason. And the topics, I also get to go and tell my husband what I heard this today, and I'm informed. So thank you for that.
There's a fair amount of consideration of to being given to my not being on the show at all. Would you vote for that?
No.
No. All right. I loved having you on, and we hope you'll come back regularly.
Thank you. I'm always on.
All right. Well, raise your hand more. We'd love to hear from you on a regular basis. Thank you.
I think we need merch that says, Mark, I love you, but. Yeah, great t-shirt.
Yeah. Hold on. Just keep going. I've got new merch.
Yeah. Okay. Sean's got new merch. And while we do that, let's bring Jackson, who's mirthful and has spectacular beard. Some of our community members have the most spectacular beards. Jackson, welcome in. Also in Tennessee, which is apparently the home base of two-way. Welcome, Jackson. What's on your mind, sir?
Hello to Diana. I'm outside of Nashville and Franklin, Tennessee. I loved Dan's article yesterday that was referencing the 2030 census, and I wanted to learn a little bit more. I guess it's not really ground game, but it's kind of the strategy state by state. And I've seen a couple of articles referencing that something about the 2020 electoral distribution is in dispute, like there was undercounting of red states or something to that effect. And I just wondered if you guys knew anything about that topic. And then specifically, where do Democrats focus on kind of the red side of the state distribution? Where do you try and flip from here? Curious your thoughts, all of you, on that kind of long-term geographic strategy.
Great question, Dan. Since you wrote on it, go first.
Yeah, so for those who haven't seen it, it's on X, and the point of the story is, again, if Democrats want to be successful after 2028, simply winning back the blue wall states and holding what they currently have will not likely be sufficient, barring some massive migration back to the north in the next 4 years. I think the 2020 debate, every census, right? There's always people who argue that you've undercounted certain populations of the country. Democrats for years have argued about low-income people in urban centers haven't been appropriately. And so, why this matters is a lot of federal funding formulas are based on the census. Obviously, there's the politics of the Electoral College. So, what happened? I don't know the specific issue with 2020, but I just know generally, like, everyone's always upset and tries to squeeze a little more out of the count. I think for 2030, look, the Democrats have to stop the momentum that Trump has with all of these demographics and geographically across the board, right? I mean, he improved his standing in like 98% of the counties of this country. He improved his standing with almost every demographic. So the way the parties tend to do this is you think about who are the groups that we want to try to make inroads with. Where are they, on the map? What does the state look like? Are there groups that are migrating out of a state that may make it a little more, hospitable to us as well? And then you have to have a set of policies that appeals to the issues that are popular there. And you'll look at like probably anywhere that you lost by 7 to 8 points or less. So again, we've talked about this for a while. It's Carolina, it's Georgia. Florida and Texas are the two that have kind of really gotten away from the party. Like Florida is just drifting further and further and further away, even though there's more and more migration. I mean, they may pick up 4 seats or 4 electoral college votes here when this is reapportioned, and it's going to come out of New York and Massachusetts and, Ohio. So I think, the Sun Belt is probably where the party, needs to really focus.
The interesting thing to me that's will be interesting. Trump, you remember Wilbur Ross, who's the Commerce Secretary that oversees the Census Bureau, tried to make some questions on the last sentence about citizenship. And I wouldn't be surprised to see those again. And one of the things that always astonishes me, our census counts heads, right? So it doesn't count citizens. So this whole issue of illegal immigration matters tremendously to representation, to electoral count, to electoral votes and electoral count. So I will be really interested to see what the Commerce Department does on this, because it really goes out. I mean, you think about how it extrapolates in terms of federal funding, representation, all of these things get driven from the census. And when you're counting folks that are in the country illegally, and you talk about where they've been shifted and all that, that all matters suddenly a lot more than people might see at face value.
I'll be interested. Florida and Texas and Georgia and Louisiana have a lot of non-citizen people, and if you were to take them all out, it would hurt them.
Well, it's a great point you bring up. It's a dirty secret, right? Because if they can't vote, but you get representation for them, where does that go? Meaning, if you get it in certain areas of Texas, it actually benefits Democrats. But overall, state net, it's if you're counting electoral votes by state, which everyone but 2 do, then it actually benefits Republicans.
Jackson, I can't think of a better Tennessee name than Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Come back regularly, okay?
Thank you. Love two-way.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Pierce, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind today.
Oh, mute.
Thank you. Okay, I am from Orange County. I'm a native Californian, long time, come from grew up in third generation Californian, grew up in the Inland Empire, now live in Orange County, politically active family, the most traditional of Republicans, and my family was as well. But now I'm a visceral Trump supporter and have been since 2016 for a host of reasons. The most of which is I was mobilized as a reservist and did a combat tour in Iraq in 2008, 2009.
Thank you.
So, and so since I'm such a traditional Republican, it goes without saying, I love Sean, and I'm also a MAGA person. And it goes without saying, Mark, you're the greatest of all political reporters, beginning with Game Change. But I really, really love Dan too. Dan's the greatest. You know, how can you not love Dan? And we often talk about his infectious smile. I want to point out Dan is quite dapper. Does anybody point that out?
That's been noted.
Okay.
Oh,
He
goodness.
sends us tips. He
Ooh.
says, "Could you please start dressing
If
accordingly?"
you've ever staged the closing credits of the show, you've noticed that it says Dan's wardrobe provided by
Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, I try to. I'm dressed up at this early hour just to be on the show with you.
Oh.
But anyway, my key point is, I guess what I would ask Dan, a national security question. I really wanted to ask this before the election. Had Kamala Harris, had Vice President really won, had she actually won the election, do you think she would have picked Liz Cheney for the cabinet? Would she have been the Secretary of Defense? And I mean, don't you just think that's, well, anyway, what would you say to that?
I think that she would be picking a fight with her own base very, very early on. I mean, it's an interesting question because no doubt had she won, Liz Cheney probably would rightfully have deserved some credit for her candor and willingness to stand up against Trump and call him out. So you would think that unless she says, I'm going to wait a few years and run against Kamala Harris in a new Republican Party, that you would want to reward her in some way. But I can't imagine the Bernie Sanders wing of the party and Elizabeth Warren would have been okay with Liz Cheney running the Department of Defense and advocating for, you know, potentially, let's say, ground troops in Ukraine or kind of something of that nature. So, boy, it's fun to think about Harris's picks that would have
just
happened.
I'll play the role of John McLaughlin. She would have been ambassador to NATO. That's what they would have named. I mean, she would have been, they would have found somewhere. I mean, that's the perfect role, right? You don't want her controlling funds, warmongering, etc. But you put her over at NATO, she would have taken it. And the other thing that's left out of the discussion is what would the makeup of the Senate be? Because there's a lot of folks that on the Dem side that might not vote for her, and there's a lot of Republicans that definitely wouldn't vote for her.
Yeah, great point. Pete, thank you for joining. Very much appreciate your participation and your kind words. Thank you. I sent Noah a clip. Noah, if you're able to turn that fast enough, I'd love to show folks just the video. In the meantime, let's go to our weather correspondent, Brian Lee. Brian, are you there? Can you step on camera and unmute?
Oh, look at the snow.
There you go. All right. So Brian's on the farm. He's got some great, snow fall. Brian, newish beard.
Yeah.
Many of our folks. Just give folks a quick update. What are the latest developments on the farm besides the snow?
The farm, we got our apiary a couple of days ago. So we got bees coming. We've got a welder who's also my full-time assistant who she was my girlfriend for years. I sent her to welding school in New Bedford. She's my amazing assistant.
Nothing says love like sending your girlfriend to
welding school. Yeah.
Darling, I have big news.
Yep. You're going to welding school.
Go to welder.
Yep. Yeah. And she took to it really. She's a much better welder than I am. And so that's going on. She also does aromatherapy and reflexology, which is going to be a great help for the farm. What else we got going on? Lots of stuff. we're gonna start. The biggest news is we've got our first. I call him Jeremy MS1. We've got our first person with MS coming up to the farm from Baltimore, because he's got a different series. Because MS is a snowflake disease, so he's got different types of MS disability as me. So he's coming up for a week, and we're just gonna make plans for his type of MS disability. So that's been great.
Brian, remind folks if they want to help and read more about the farm, where can they go?
You could go to chapinroadfarm.anything pretty much, and it'll redirect you to the right site because of the awesome tech people that helped with that. It's under the .com at the moment. That has something to do with the 401c3 being established. That takes a couple months in Massachusetts.
And what are you up to on Instagram followers? I haven't checked in a while.
I think it's like 1,500 which is crazy because I started with 4 the first day I came on, and one of them was my other account and my mom.
Go follow Brian on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram.
1,525 today.
Awesome.
We can get that to 2,000.
Check out the farm, and if you want to help out in any way, you can sign up.
And that's another thing I want to say. I just the people that have emailed the farm, just stand by, because I just haven't. That's one of the things I'm doing today, because my awesome assistant Brianna is also she's a queen of OSNet. She could sleuth out anything, and she's very good on the tech side. So I'm going to start working with her, because they wanted me to wait till my email was Brian at Chapin Road Farm to but everyone keep emailing the farm with help and ideas and stuff like that, and I will get back to you. But Instagram is the easiest way for me to communicate, because you can send me messages and I can just send a voice thing back. So that was fun when that got set up by
Brian. Make sure you come back at least once more before the end of the year to give us an update and share your holiday plans, and we couldn't be happier to see you, and we love the beard.
Hey, it's coming in nice.
Great to see you.
Great.
Noah, do we have that clip or not going to happen?
We have it.
All right. A little breaking news from the gentleman from South Carolina. Roll tape.
Kash Patel, counterterrorism prosecutor, understands the government. And if the FBI doesn't need to be cleaned out, we'll make it out of committee. I don't know if he'll get any Democrats, but I think he'll get all Republicans. I'm a big fan of his choice to be FBI director.
All right. I thought that was from this morning. It was from last night. I withdraw the video, although it's interesting. He said he's going to support him and suspect he'll be confirmed. But forget that. Dan, closing remarks for the day. We're way over.
Just interesting to see the Hegseth watch here. And Greg Kelly, I think, is very fascinating what he had to say.
Sean, if you go to the gym and you don't bring your phone, don't be surprised when you check in while you're toweling down to see some change. Go ahead.
Keep that in mind. Thank you for that. I didn't want to ruin your Christmas present, but I figured.
Hey,
you make enough for everyone?
It's some woman on Etsy does it. So she does, I'm sure. I'll send you the link.
Okay. I see. That's good. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for all the great questions. I'll be back at 6 tonight for a two-way tonight. And our special guest, Democratic Congressman from California, Ro Khanna, as part of our D-Future series. The congressman will join us. We'll chat a little bit, and we'll, of course, take your questions. So join us tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow, Sean, Dan, and I will be back for our final show of the week. And then tomorrow night, take a deep breath. There's no two-way tonight tomorrow. I'm on a plane at 6 o'clock, and you'll have to just figure out what you want to do at 6 o'clock.
Hello.
Brett Baer. There are a lot
Megan Kelly's gone my show tomorrow night, 6 o'clock.
Megan's your guest?
Megan's my guest, yeah.
A lot of cross-pollination.
I know. This is
so instead of watching two-way tonight, watch Sean and Megan, and then I'll be back Monday with a full slate of programs. But we will see you at 6 tonight with Ro Khanna. And please come with your questions, and then we'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.